All right, welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker is an atheist blogger. She runs the Pink Atheist Podcast, studying cell biology right now, and her goal is to educate people on healthy sexual living. Taking control of your atheist sexuality, please help me welcome Rachel Johnson.
So hi, everyone. I hope you're ready to talk about sex, specifically me. But if you're offended by sexual images, now is a good time to excuse yourself, because I promise you there are lots of them. Just so you know, nobody will think less of you. It's all right. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. It only gets worse. Okay. It's actually supposed to say taking control of your atheist sexuality, so that's my bad, but let's get started. The myth of monogamy. I want to impress upon you one thing. As unique as every star in the sky is, so are you and your sexuality. What I want for you is for you to walk away secure and happy and ready to take the next step. If you've read Daryl Ray's book, Sex and God, you will know where the story begins. But it doesn't end there. Because unfortunately, you're all carrying something poisonous inside, a lie which you hold dear and infect others with as well. Many atheists come from religious backgrounds, though there are a few among us that don't. Those are the lucky people. While we would like to believe that society has not had profound effects on our thoughts and who we are as human beings and sexual beings, it doesn't make it true. Society has a way of sending both obvious and subliminal messages. I'm here to help you get a closer perspective on who you are as a sexual being and break some of the stereotypes playing in your heads and give you the ability to give yourself permission to be the sexual being you choose to be for yourself. From the time you were a small child, you began to see the world the way your parents, society, and our culture told you to see it. Many women were socialized a specific way with the virgin-whore dichotomy, while men were socialized that they aren't sexually constricted as long as they don't violate the social mores. They were in fact taught to be sexual and virile, and we're going to address those differences and ask all the important questions again. They start with the basics. Who are you as a sexual being? Science has a lot to say about the history of sex among human beings, from the way our brains are wired to the how of our collective sex. One of the most important things science tells us is that we're not monogamous sexually. Throughout history, many of those biological adaptations have continued with us because they never stopped being used. People did not become monogamous at the point of agricultural development, nor are they today. Yet our society perpetuates the myth of heterosexuality. People didn't become monogamous or heterosexual because of monotheistic religions. Now, that doesn't mean all of us are not monogamous, unless you read Daryl Ray's book, and then maybe you question it. That doesn't mean we can't choose monogamy. It means the default setting on human behavior is to have many partners, to find sex exciting, and to explore sex. Society, however, has been tampering with nature for close to 12,000 years. Women have been taught they're supposed to be virginal, monogamous, dull, quiet, sexual creatures, while men are taught that they are the conquerors of women, and the more women they sleep with, the more sexually vibrant, attractive, and healthy males they are. I thought maybe you guys would enjoy this one. A little bit naughty of a nun. This is within the second myth of society, the myth of heterosexuality being the default position in human sexuality. We'll come back to that myth here shortly. For women, the two dichotomies given us by the Abrahamic religions are the virgin or the whore. These hold vital importance to a woman's value, her education, her upbringing, Her worth will inevitably be dependent upon picking one of these two roles. Meanwhile, males are immune to this impugnment of their sexual being as long as they don't violate the second myth. Now, what the primary myth does to women in society, especially our society, it has a lot of lingering effects. We don't often like to admit those as atheists. Leaving religion doesn't mean that we instantly leave the guilt and the shame that were placed upon us by our primary teachers. When it comes to religion, I've heard it reiterated again and again that Christians are far more sexual than we say. The Catholic girls are easy and wild. While that may be true, it lasts for a short time, and any man who's been with a religious woman, a religious woman long enough knows full well that the guilt finally catches up. Some women never make it too far before the guilt is in bed with them. Women are taught to be guilty for their needs, guilty for their desires, and guilty about their bodies from birth. The primary myth places a heavy burden on women that blames them not only for their behavior, but that of men as well. How many of us were told that it's our beauty that makes men weak? How many of us were taught to cover our bodies, that certain clothes would make us look trashy, easy, or slutty? When it comes to how we should be seen, we need look no further than every princess story ever told. It shows a girl too beautiful to be resisted, jealousy by other women, all the while showing us her purity must not be questioned. In the end, she's saved by a man who will possess her, be her savior and owner, and somehow she'll live happily ever after because she belongs to him. Women face constant ridicule. How many times have you heard men say, "She's not the kind of girl you'd take home to your mother"? Words like easy, whore, slut, tramp, harlot, skank are a part of our society. Even the reference to a female breeding dog or bitch are words used to describe women who refuse to conform to society's standards of virginal womanhood, second class, silent and reverent of men, and docile. So if women aren't living up to this standard, it's easy for men to throw this term out against them. In the stories of our society, our minds, women must always use caution, present themselves as chaste, and not be looked upon for their sexual proclivity. Women are to be the ever-clean virgin mothers. Sperm makes them dirty. And the more sperm and males they have been around, the less value they have as wives and mothers of our children. We must change the course of our own thinking. Every sex education class in America teaches that when you sleep with someone, you're sleeping with everyone they've slept with. While this could be true if they've not used caution and had protected sex, why is it a bad thing in any other form? Is having a partner who can fulfill your fantasies, needs, and wants a bad thing? What if having many partners was a good thing? We only benefited from healthy sex. What if we could pick and choose a different partner every night? What if society placed no heavy-handed burden on us to conform, and we were sexually liberated people, and we weren't possessions? Is it so far removed from the truth to see this? Why can't you sleep with anyone you want? Now, there are boundaries that people don't want crossed, and that would be cheating. That's pretty simple. But why do we have this notion that we own our partner's sex life? Why do we feel that we get to say that they must conform? While this goes for men and women, we are taught in youth never to question the sexual history of a male, while he's taught to question ours. There should be no accountability to anyone but yourself. We have to turn back and look at religion to see why we are so sexually repressed. Because they've been teaching us for centuries that our genitals are unclean, that they lead us astray from our perpetual virginhood, and we must be ever vigilant of our desires, lest they destroy us. This brings me to the history of sex. I do believe that this is called hermaphroditus. And this was one of the Greek gods. So when we think back to the history of sexuality, this isn't something you're going to see in the mainstream in your history books. because they don't want to face the fact that even back then, hermaphrodites existed, that sexuality wasn't what they're telling you it is today. History is trying to be rewritten by a bunch of sterile-minded Christians who want to label the past as archaic, out of sorts, and ungodly. The reality is something we should pay attention to. There was every type of sex in history, including ones that would land you in prison today. In the time of Plato, many men had their boy lovers. In the time of the Romans and Egyptians, orgies took place in the palaces. Sometimes the orgies lasted for days. Some of the notorious historical figures, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, who carried on a love affair, often held orgies. Caligula, the once emperor of Rome, was said to have such a twisted mind that he tortured people to death with sex, engaged in coitus with his sister, his horse, and forced senators to prostitute their wives. Historically, sex had less limitations going backwards. I love this. When you think of orgies, you don't think of kangaroos, but they know how to get it on, so. It was the onslaught of Abrahamic religions which altered the future of man and his sexual proclivity. Even in ancient Egypt, sex was not important. Early history of mankind shows how sex was not hidden. In Africa, many tribes had sex in the open. Native Americans held sex to be a vital part of life. Romans had prostitutes as well as the Greek. In the Greek and Roman culture, there were male bathhouses as well as female ones. Gay and lesbian sex was just a part of life. In the history of Hinduism, there was a small penance to be paid if you violated the same-sex rules. Sex was everywhere in history. In Europe, where the Neanderthals lived, in the caves, there was no form of privacy. Sex was done in the open, a natural part of life. The religious in America would have you believe that history was painted with virginity, which is not the case. Humans have not deviated from their original nature, nor will they. Our social sexual nature comes through. As much as we need to interact with one another to bond as a society, is as much as we need to interact sexually. Why sex is not just seen as another social behavior, it is beyond me, because it really is. Sex has been shared in many tribes, and it's been a vital part of how they functioned. It's something that we engage in just to enjoy it, to have some good orgasms, and we do it, hopefully, responsibly. We're tied to the shame of our bodies, the forbidden sexual nature of our humanity, and chained from true expression of it by a doctrine we don't even follow. But we fear our neighbors, our bosses, our friends. We fear what our families will say and how we will be ostracized by them if they know the reality of the sex we want to be having. Meanwhile, we continue unchained, perpetuating a myth we don't really even want to believe. But it's only one of the myths we believe about sex. Monogamy was just the tip of the iceberg. The second myth is a bit more harmful, even destructive at times. The myth of heterosexuality being the default position on human sexual behavior. We're raised in a society where people are ignorant to the facts of sexuality. But one of the worst offenses that is perpetuated is heterosexuality being the norm, and all other deviations from this norm being abnormal and choices and sick and part of a mental illness and evil. The reality is something the religious want to keep most people from knowing. Since the time of the Kama Sutra, an Indian book on not only sex, but the expectations of sexual behavior on the part of men and women, man has noted homosexuality. Hinduism is the world's oldest recorded religion. The Kama Sutra was written in an era long before Abrahamic religions were even thought of. In the book, it explicitly talks about male-on-male sex, that a master may engage in sex with his slaves, male or female, at will. There was nothing abnormal seen in this action. As Hindu culture developed further, homosexuality was looked down on in some degree. Not near the way it is today, but as sex that produced no offspring. So that was the only problem that Hinduism really saw with homosexuality. So it was punishable by a small fine. Nothing compared to the extremes we see today. That was only if your sex had been discovered. And we all know that a lot of secret sex exists even in our world today. Native Americans had a name for homosexuals. They were the warriors of two spirits and held as sacred. There was nothing bad seen about two people being homosexual, and it was seen as a natural spirit in some. In Greek, Athens, Egypt, and around the globe, homosexuality arose in every part of the world. The difference was, before Abrahamic religions, the practice was looked upon as something that just was, not something to be called into question. Whatever sex people were having, even if others didn't approve, it was not seen as something deviant about the person, but as a natural desire. Many men and women were married, but the men would still go to the male bathhouses, and the women would have women lovers. Orgies were plentiful, sex was taking place every day, all hours of the day and night, somewhere around the world. Science has since found that heterosexual behavior is not as cut and dry as once thought. Many young men in boarding schools, like Christopher Hitchens, have engaged in various forms of mutual masturbation, oral sex, or even anal sex. Many women in their college years have had lesbian experiences. While society tries to pretend that we're not exploring sex every chance we get, millions of people are. There are bisexual males and females. We're learning that having blurred sexual boundaries is highly predominant. And those who are strictly heterosexual are more rare among us. Though we have socialized a lot of sexual oppression into people, and many would never even admit to having those thoughts. Humans enjoy sex. And if they were at liberty to explore all sexual options without fear of reprisal or judgment, they would likely try homosexuality once or twice, and might incorporate those acts into their general sexual behavior. One thing that religion has done well is create a hostile myth against sexual exploration. It has vilified those who are gay or sexual in any form that is not strictly hetero and mundane. For humans as well as other species, touch is pleasurable, and we find that we don't really care about who is making us feel good, as long as it feels good and we enjoy it. While there needs to be attraction to stimulate the primary response, when left to entertain our desires freely, human beings will try almost anything, except for the limited few. Homosexuality, whether by birth or by choice, by brain function, is not a crime, a sin, dirty, wrong, or in any form abnormal. It's simply another expression of love, a form of sex and bonding. I want to talk about what it means for you to express your sexuality and who you are. And that means talking about the freedom to be you. There is no label to put on you. No one can tell you who you should be. Each of us is as different from the next one beside us. While many of us have similar thoughts and desires, we don't all want the same thing, especially when it comes to sex. There are many types of sexuality and sexual individuals, from sapiosexual to polysexual to pansexual, and even asexual, homosexual, heterosexual, transsexual, and transgender. There are different sexual styles: polyandry, polygamy, monogamy, threesomes, orgies, gangbangs, SMBD. And yeah, I just said all that. Sex does not come prepackaged, and you don't know what you're really looking for until you explore. And sexual exploration can be adventurous. It's not permission from the external world you really need. It's permission from yourself. We have to be willing to take charge, ask questions, explore, and make sex part of our lives, an important part of our lives. Most people think that sex and love are exclusive. They're living under the delusion that having perfect communication, and they think that their partner would never cheat on them. Recently, when I asked atheists questions about their sex lives and their needs, These were the answers I saw the most. How important is communication? Most people said it's very important, while some answers were quite startling. And I'll come back to that. I asked if it was okay to withhold sex to hurt someone. And most people said no. But a majority of the men said that it had been done to them. I asked if people would end the relationship if someone cheated on them. The majority said yes. This is where the tricky part comes in. Most people believe that they have been communicating openly with their partner, but the results on cheating, open communication, and rejection of sex, along with alienation, are high among those who answered. This fits well with what we know is going on in society. The fact is, people love their partner, and their partner has said that they're not open to certain things, so people cheat. Monogamy is not the spice of life, and it's rare that people can continue to suffer when their needs are not met. One of the biggest culprits is the alienation of affection. When people don't feel loved at home or their sexual needs are not ever being met, they will find a way to meet those needs. While our community is skeptical of many things, we have not stopped to be skeptical about our sex. When it comes to fulfillment, we aren't yet rising above the curve. Atheists are just as hurt, rejected, and alienated about their sexual health as any group. We want to believe that it's not us being cheated on, or living in a loveless romance, but many times it is. You might think that no one needs to tell you how to have sex or what is best for you, but this is your one life, and everything you do ultimately, you're heading towards that barn door that Hitchens spoke of. So the love you make counts. We should be one of the most uninhibited groups of sexual people. While safe sex is always, always important, the stereotypes given to us by society about our bodies need to be shed. No one should care what you do with your body and the sex that you choose. If they do, make it their problem and don't let it become yours. Many people walk the world believing that sex is an easy topic, that it's simple. You find someone, have some orgasms, maybe fall in love, and then life will be bliss. This is not true for many people. From problems with honesty and what we need, to negative self-images, to the fact that life gets in the way. We're not having the sex we need, want, or desire desperately. We overcomplicate, overthink, shame, blame, and deny what our sex could be. Our society has put a heavy burden on sex, attaching it to archaic religious notions, backed up only by hearsay and conjecture. Right now, millions of little children are being taught about their bodies in horrible, negative, and demeaning ways. It's led to teen suicide, sex abuse, and deviant behaviors among the most religious. We have to rise above that. Our community needs to be sex positive. We need to accept sexuality as it is and not try to define it for each other. We need to accept, there should be no slut shaming, no taboo when it comes to sex. We should be free to explore all options. If it's selfish to want your sexual needs met, then be selfish. I don't condone cheating, but I understand why it happens. When a partner is unwilling to listen, it can be hurtful. Their reasons can be good ones. No one wants to feel unwanted, unloved, or unneeded by their partner. No one wants to feel like they're not exciting. We don't want to be rejected or told that we're no longer irresistible in bed. Men and women who catch their spouse cheating don't realize, while they are not to blame directly, they may have set the stage for it to happen. When we define another person's sex, refuse to hear about their needs or desires, withhold emotion, and forget to be a sexual being, there are consequences. Many people won't leave a toxic relationship because of the children. When they ask me about it, I often say, the fact that you're willing to remain unhappy means that you're setting your children up to be sexually unhappy. Realistically, we may not be all our partners need or want. Sometimes we find that we need something more. We find that we need pleasure beyond what we have. We have a duty to our partners. With that comes the duty to reciprocate sexual favors and pleasure. That may mean incorporating toys, other people, other forms of sex, or just getting what you need may be the answer. But we have to be open-minded about sex. We don't have to be ashamed of what we want or need, and we should never let anyone make us feel that way. After today, do some real introspection about your sex life, the history of your sex, and see who's been deciding for you. Look deeper into what you need and want, and try to start the conversation. Men and women are different, but when it comes to sex, just because women produce 1 egg per month does not make them more monogamous than men. It means how we express it is different. Men tend to be more sexual and need it more often than women. Women are often the ones stuck with the majority of the chores in the home as well as a job. We neglect vital parts of our lives until life becomes unbearable. We forget to take care of something that was once very important to us, and that is love, sex, orgasms, and self-expression. Love is a vital part of our lives. It's not only in the form of pair bonding, but in having a constant mate. Exploring sex may not mean giving up what you have, but exploring outside of it with your partner. Many people say that they would not be okay with their spouse having sex with someone else. They just can't be okay with that, because then how is that love? My answer to this is simple. You love your family and your friends, and they're all having sex with other people, hopefully. So love is not defined by the sex that you're having. It's defined by the bond that you made and the respect that you share. During the preliminary part of the love experience, people go through a pair bonding process, a chemical high brought on by the brain. They then enter into the honeymoon phase where sex is abundant. But after a while, the chemicals wear off and suddenly the dynamics change. This leaves a post-nostalgia drop and need for further exploration. Only true bonds sustain after this point. So my final message to you is you are beautiful and sexual. Being an atheist means you can have hot, sloppy, guilt-free, orgasmic sex. It means that there should be no conditions put on you that you don't accept. We are God-free, but we're not yet guilt-free when it comes to sex. Sometimes there's still a third or fourth person in bed with us, our conscience. We feel like people won't like us or accept us, that we will be shunned. But the truth is, a body is a terrible thing to waste, worrying what others will think of you. You're probably not a supermodel, and you will never be. Maybe your nose is a little funny, or you have a little more curves than you want. Perhaps nature didn't give you everything you long for, but you are beautiful. And the good news is, if you look hard enough, you can find someone who enjoys you as much as you need to be. But don't limit yourself to one partner if it's not your sincere choice. Don't cage your sexual expression. Never let someone else define you sexually. Stop being a stereotype and forgive people for their needs. Teach your children to accept people of different sexual and life choices. It's time we put the burden back on religion to prove that there is anything wrong with what people are doing. We need to work on a few things in our community, the first being cheating. It is a problem because it means we're still not listening and hearing what our partners need. The second thing is not withholding sex because you are angry and unwilling to let go of the issue. There's a limit of time to that you should be hurt. If your pain and anger surpasses that, then perhaps it's time for some counseling. Otherwise, what you're doing by purposely withholding sex is akin to emotional abuse. The third thing we need to do is let ourselves be sexual. If you're afraid, why are you afraid? If you don't trust your partner, why don't you trust them? Why should you not be having explosive orgasms every night or almost every night? I can't believe that sex is not high on your to-do list. People who are sexually happy live longer, function better, have better relationships, and overall enjoy their lives. You don't have to buy the myths, not even in your bedroom. So if you're polyamorous, polysexual, pansexual, homosexual, transsexual, or whatever sexual, if you want to try orgies, threesomes, pegging, SMB and BD, whips, chains, and every kinky thing that you can think of, then do it. Never let anyone suggest that you are not normal and that you shouldn't explore sex. I'm surprised, honestly, that no one has tried space sex. This really disheartens me. I want that video. We need to work on that. First, though, we need to be okay with our needs, our flaws, and our desires. So break the myths, leave religion outside the doors, and be as sexual and happy as you can be. Now go out and orgasm. Let it multiply, and here's hoping that you get all the kinky sex you ever hoped for.
Thank you, Rachel. We do have time for questions. If anybody would like to cue at the mic right up here, we have that live. Okay, if you'd like to cue there.
Okay.
And cue behind in the middle, please.
I was just curious what your definition of deviant sex is.
Yeah. I define deviant sex as any harmful behavior and illegal behavior as far as involving children who can't consent, things like that, the traditional norms.
Don't you think there needs to be like consensual when you're starting with all these, when you enter a marriage contract, you better have some consensual agreement on if your husband's wanting to have multiple partners and you're like, I want to be monogamous, you're going to have a lot of problems.
That's true. And my advice to people would be don't get into something that you can't really commit to.
Right. But you're saying go ahead, try it out. And don't get married. If you're going to have multiple, then that is usually not in the United States. You're not old enough for the 70s. Open marriage was just like a big thing. And guess what happened? They tend to bond with another person, and then that's heartbreak, because I know a couple that happened to. They were psychologists, they were open, and he went off and some other female got his heart, tore her up because she was experimenting with open marriage, trying to, trusting, loving, and it happens. So
it happens in committed monogamous relationships. We can't ever say that things are going to be perfect.
But why not be a big person and separate before you betray?
Well, here's the thing, but that's once again defining somebody else's sexuality. If you have two people who are perfectly happy with an open marriage and they're really committed to that.
Consensual.
Exactly. And I never say to somebody that you should force your ideology upon somebody else.
Okay, because I wasn't hearing that message. I heard you say, go out, try it, do it. It's fine, it's normal, but it's not all normal.
I wouldn't go that far as to say it's
Bestiality is not
well,
normal.
nobody's saying that you should go to the backyard and get the cow. Okay.
Right. You got to have consensual. You got to have consensual. And
I said people. But see, this is the problem in society. You actually address it rather well.
The slave, that right there, women have been in an oppressed position to provide sex and throughout history, and it's wrong. It should be all consensual.
It should be, but women are being taught, they're still being taught that their bodies are not sexual and they're not supposed to be used for that. That's going to continue as long as religion exists. I'm not saying that, I'm not into telling people to go get animals and have sex with them. I would never cross that line. That's completely inappropriate. They can't consent. Okay. But human adults can consent. And so here's the thing.
Consensual. That's all I say. If you want to go out and have orgies, consensual.
But also, would you really want to be married to somebody who decided that they wanted to try an open marriage and you're completely against it? Because ultimately, aren't you thinking?
That's when you should be talking about beforehand. You should know your partner, but that's when you go and it may be a separation because you cannot agree. It's agree to disagree. But I think that's what you do before you cheat. before
Oh,
you
I would agree,
go
but
out
it's
and-
not happening. I
and
mean,
it isn't always when someone cheats that they're not being supplied everything they need. I guarantee you.
that's not always the dynamic. But
It's not always, but I guarantee you, I can speak point blank on that.
well, you have thousands of dynamics playing out in society
there are people
every
that
day.
do things on compulsion, and so you don't
Well-
always have. It's got to be consensual. Just leave it at consensual, and then we can agree to disagree.
That's fine. That's fine. Any other questions? All right, just don't do the goats in the backyard. That's all, guys, okay?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Rachel. Let's give her a round of applause.